Well, welcome back, everyone. Today I'm honored to be joined by Csaba Leidenfrost. Thank you for joining me.
You're welcome. It's a
Yeah.
pleasure.
Quick introduction on you. So, you were born in Liberia to mission family,
Yes.
and then you came to the U.S., studied in linguistics and wildlife management,
Right.
and then were commissioned to translate the Bible into the Bakwe language by Wycliffe translators.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Well, we were sent there. Basically, they were asked. Wycliffe was asked to send the tribe asked Wycliffe to send somebody out to translate the Bible for them. The people did, but we knew that Ivory Coast was where we were supposed to go because I grew up in Liberia and the culture right next door is very similar. So we thought, okay, that gives us a leg up. I kind of know. I grew up over there. I kind of know the place. My wife came from Chicago, from an engineering family, so she had no exposure to that kind of life.
Yes.
And
I can imagine that'd be quite a drastic shift for her.
yeah, yes.
How
Yeah.
was the shift for you coming to the U.S. from Liberia?
From Liberia? So I spent all the way through high school there, with brief trips coming back and forth. When my parents were missionaries, they'd have a furlough and come back to the States, and it was a culture shock for me. Yeah, I grew up wanting to be black because all my friends were black, and I felt black. I felt like I fit in there. Everything was normal, and then I come here and you got to figure out all the, you go down the cereal aisle and there's like 30 million cereals to choose from, not just one.
Yep.
And it just overload, it's overload. A lot of things. I came to the dorms here at the U of I to study wildlife management. I started out and did my BS in wildlife management, and then into graduate studies in linguistics. But I got to the dorms with American passport. My parents are American, and then I look around me in the dorms and like, if this is what American is, I must not be American. Just the not serious about school, drunk, partying and all that. So yeah, I hit it off with the international students, and then slowly became American, I guess.
Yes. Yes. And then how did you get involved with Wycliffe translators?
Yeah, so in my third year of college here in wildlife management, the Lord was working on me. I wanted to use wildlife as a way to get back to Africa and do ministry. And I'd seen examples of people that were in the professional roles, doing Bible studies, helping church planners do church planning and that sort of thing. And I thought, okay, that I can do. And then I got this lady came up from Guatemala, a biologist, and she gave a talk, and it just totally discouraged me she had spent 30 years trying to save this one bird, and a coup d'etat took place in the country, and then all of a sudden there was no bird, it was gone. And so I felt the Lord was saying, I want you to work with people. Animals are, stewardship is good, but people are what I want you to work with. And I ran into a Wycliffe missionary here at a missions conference here in town. And I talked to him afterwards. My dad was a Bible translator, so I knew what Bible translation was like. But Dad could work in 8 languages. And I had trouble with English grammar in grade school, and so I'm thinking, but I grew up speaking Hungarian at home with my dad, English with my mom. She was from Idaho, Pidgin English outside, the African language my parents were working in outside. So I grew up around 4 languages. So, but I thought, I'm terrible in languages. Dad does 8. But this missionary said, you ought to go try to just go to Wycliffe, train with them in the summer, just do a summer course. And they'll tell you whether you're equipped you have the abilities for Bible translation. And I did. And when we got married, we headed over there, and I never got better grades in my life. It was just like, that was where God wanted me.
How'd you choose the Bakwe
The
people?
Bakwe? Well, again, because of Liberia, my wife and I felt like going somewhere completely different would be possible. But having been raised in Africa, I had a burden for Africa and knew the needs there. And West Africa in particular, I didn't want to go to Liberia. So because Liberia was like my home territory, it would be like my wife would be left behind. I'd be just back in my
Right.
turf, right?
Yep.
So we were on our honeymoon in Liberia, visiting my parents who couldn't make the wedding. And we spent some time on the beach down in the city, interviewing missionaries down there. And everybody was saying it's easy to get Americans to come to English-speaking African countries because then they only have to learn one language, the African language that they're working in, not French or Portuguese or Spanish to then work in the... So Ivory Coast was next door, and we started praying about Ivory Coast and looking into the needs there. There was still some 30 languages that didn't have Bible translation done. And the Bakwe were just across the border from where we were looking and praying on this one mountain. And we're like, well, they're further away than you can see. But anyhow, we felt like, okay, there's a need there. They've been asking for a translator to come from Wycliffe. 15 years now they've been waiting by the time we got there. So we said, well, let's try those. Let's pray about that and see what happens. And that's how we ended up there.
Yeah. Quick introduction to the Bakwe people. Where are they, and what's their history?
So the Bakwe are in the southwest corner of Ivory Coast, Côte d'Ivoire. And they're in the Kru language family. They're a smaller group. Most of the missionaries, when missions came to West Africa and to the Ivory Coast, they went to the larger languages first, right? Strategic. But a lot of the smaller languages then didn't have any mission work, and even gospel proclaimed, churches. So we saw that and we thought, okay, they don't even have a written language when we arrived, many of these languages. And they've been asking for it. So we did some language survey in the area and then got assigned to the Bakwe people.
Why do they not have a written down language?
Okay, so hunters and gatherers and some of these folks that are they're living from hand to mouth. They don't have time to do art. I mean, they don't have time to do a lot of things. They have time to just basically cut down the forest, make farm, get some rice off of the farm, and get some animals out there. And hunting was a big thing. It isn't anymore because they've sort of depleted the wildlife. But so a lot of these places just haven't had time in their culture to develop a written system, written down, and there's no reason to do so for them. They speak their language to each other in small family groups in small villages, spread out through the jungle, and they used to fight against their neighbors, other tribes, and so they just never had their language written down. But they speak their language, and it's very, very complicated and very interesting. So our first task was to live among them and start learning the language with no books. But in our linguistic studies, that's what we were taught to do. Go out there, start carrying your book around with the International Phonetic Alphabet. We're starting to write down the sounds that we're hearing. And then you start realizing there's like 300 sounds, and there's no way they need that many for an alphabet. So in the phonological analysis, where we analyze the sound system, you collect all those sounds, and then you start finding the rules for how many letters really are needed to be able to make sense, right, of those word units and suffixes and that sort of thing. So we analyzed the sounds. We developed an alphabet, started testing it, and first we had to build a house, and there's no electricity, and so my wife that I can go into and tell you more about that.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so we get there, and we have a 2-year-old and a 6-month-old, and right around that, first we had to learn French in France. Wycliffe, we do with our visa requirements in the country of Ivory Coast. We have to provide data. All our data and our linguistic analyses need to be written in French. So our agreement was with the university in the country. So they want all that information, and it's a French-speaking country because of the French colonized it years ago. So we had to learn French and learn it at a level to be able to write linguistic papers in it. And so we learned that. Then we moved out to the village, no house. Oh, man. And they had a house we could rent a room in someone's house, but there's no way with 2 kids and a wife from Chicago and even me, there's no way we could actually get anything done in that situation. So we decided to start building, made cinder blocks, one brick at a time, pressed them out and let them dry in the sun, and eventually with the help of Christians from outside the village, other African tribes, friends that I had gotten to know, helped us build the house. The Bakwe actually didn't lift a hand to help us. They were like, okay, here's another white guy coming in here to exploit us, right? Because they've been exploited by the French for years, and they're like, okay, we'll see how long he lasts. So it was interesting that way, and we slowly we moved in and named two of our kids after two of the wise men in the village, the chief and another wise man, and started winning them over, and it's taken a long time. But and then learning the language, analyzing the grammar, starting to write. We started out with writing down their folk tales, because they have these oral folk tales, right? And they tell them, and they're sort of like they're standard, like everybody knows, Little Red Riding Hood story, right? Just about every American. Well, they have stories like that. Everybody knows about the rabbit or the bush deer and the crocodile, let's say, and so. We started taking those, recording those with on tape. At that time, it was cassette tape, and then transcribing those, and then printing that with the alphabet, and started showing people their language written down. And then we started developing teaching materials for people, teaching people how to learn how to read and write, and then training teachers to do that, and that continues on. But it's not continuing on really fast, because an oral culture like the Bakwe, it takes a while to actually really see a need for learning how to read, right? And so we're seeing we finished the New Testament. We translated that. You can tell more about that. In 2009, we had the dedication, and we put it on audio format so it's in the Google Play Store. You can download it off of Bible.is, and Bakwe, Bakwe, and we had a professional recording team come in and audition the Bakwe speakers that were going to read the part, or actually read the scriptures. So Mary is a woman. The crowd that says "Crucify him" are Bakwe crowd, right, yelling "Crucify him" in Bakwe, and it's really cool. And more people are actually listening to the scriptures than actually right now in this generation than read it. And that's pretty cool, because over there, when they turn on their phone with audio on it, it's like as high as you can go. Turn it up as high, and everybody around you starts listening. Right?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That's wild and incredible.
You've probably seen that, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Why were they having such difficulty adopting a written mode of language?
Well, okay, here's an example of it. There's really no need for them, at least not the average non-Christian, to learn how to read. He's a farmer, or he's a hunter-gatherer. What is he going to do with it? At home, it was kerosene lantern in the evening, and people's eyes, aren't used to seeing that close and doing stuff that close, especially in bad light. So we have our font for the languages has been developed for low light situations, so that even the printed scriptures. But so people don't really see a need to read. We have to convince people that and have enough literature in different areas of domains of experience for people to have an interest in. Oh, I want to learn more about that. For example, here's another. We made hymnals. The Bakwe Harris Church was an African independent church, not started by missionaries, and some interesting doctrinal issues there. But we knew that they would use the scriptures because they think very highly of the scriptures, but they didn't have them. But they sing these songs, so we transcribe their songs and put them in a book, and nobody uses them because they all know them by heart, and they have to dance. They're dancing and clapping when they're worshiping. So no one has time to hold a book, right? It's only us frozen Western or Northerners that have a book. So that was an example of not needing it. But they say for a society to really become literate, you need to have at least 200 titles of literature, 200 different titles, not all in one domain of interest. So we published some things on medical, how to care for a pregnancy to birth, and then for a woman from birth to 2 years old, how to take care of your child, and health booklets on dysentery. We did on pesticides. A lot of kids die from pesticides, so we had a little booklet on pesticides with illustrations in it. And then we have a book on the life of the Jews, the practices of the Jews with pictures. We had folk tales, so various different things, different types of literature that people could, that seems interesting. I want to learn more about how to take care of my farm, let's say, or how Jesus used to live, how the people around Jesus' time lived. So it takes a while for a culture to see the need for it, and one of the things they need to just being able to have the time to do it. You go to your farm, you come back, and you're dead tired. It's hard labor out there. It's hot. You're sweaty. You take a shower, and at 6:15 it's dark. Yep. And 6 a.m. it's light. It's like there's no play in there, and so they don't have a lot of time for leisure. The kids now are being sent to schools. The French schools, they'll try to send their kids to school. A lot of kids will drop out and never really learn to read French. And the issue for a lot of them is that they speak French at school, are punished if they used to be punished. I don't know if it's happening today, if they speak their own language at the school. So they're just parroting French. They come home and they speak their own language. And it's like, it takes many years to actually learn how to read. I had guys that I worked with that were learned to read, and they were in sixth grade. They were maybe 20 years old, and they had only reached 6th grade. And I would have them open up the French Bible and start reading it, and it was painful to hear them try to. And they got better over time, but painful.
But it takes a long time.
It takes time. Yeah.
Why did you feel the need we're going to translate this into a written language?
Yeah, good question. Well, because I believe that the people needed the scriptures. They need to know for themselves what their pastors are teaching them. And so many folks that are in some of the churches that have started there, the churches often are in French. They have, I'll tell you a story. This one chief's wife came to me from a far village and came, and she had been in one of our classes, learned how to read. She had never been into French school. And she was a Christian, but she didn't know anything she knew the bare basics, right, of the gospel. But she came to me and she opens up the Bible and she starts reading John just fluently. And I go tears just start streaming down my eyes. And then she says, thank you so much for coming, because I go to church on Sunday. I can pick out Jesus. I can pick out the French here and there, those words, but I didn't know all the things that Jesus did, on this earth. And that really is important for them to know, really, and ask hard questions of their pastors, because there's so much bad doctrine out there. And wherever the Bible has been translated, it's impacted the language and impacted the culture in one way or another. You have the Reformation, right? With the Catholic Church, people were forced to use Latin in their service. And nobody, you just did what the priest told you to do, and you just followed along. And when John Wycliffe, started translating in the people's language, people started saying something's wrong with our leaders. Something's not right here. And that's true everywhere the scriptures go. So we believe that everybody needs to have the scriptures, and it's the gospel it's only the gospel that's gonna save people and help people ultimately in whatever culture it goes into.
Were there teachers there who were preaching the Bible, but a different or wrong version of it?
Yeah. There still are.
And were they trying to create a written translation as well, or was it okay?
No. So a lot of the pastors that go to seminary, go to Bible school, usually don't want to go out to the villages. They want to go to the city and be a big pastor with a lot of congregants to get money.
Yep.
It is just a tendency to take care of their family, and that's a huge pressure, is to take care of your family financially. So it's hard. Those that are out in the rural areas, which is most of the country, their pastors hardly get any training. Churches are popping up all over the place now, but many of them have no idea really. They've never read the scriptures themselves, even in French. And those that do get off to Bible school get some training, and then it's hard to get them to come back. They do come back, some, but there's no real check accountability for what they're teaching, because the people they're teaching to don't know the scriptures because they're not readers and they don't have it in their own language. So yeah, that's what we believe, is that everybody that speaks a language and can't use a second language that already has the scriptures in it really needs to have the scriptures translated in their own language.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'll just say this, French is going to be ultimately, that we want people to be able to get good jobs over there. And the easiest way to get into French is to learn to read and write in your own language, and then bridge into French. And we've done, Wycliffe over there, SIL, our organization there, did experiments in 4 major languages in the country. We did a test group. We took kids from the same age group, went into learned to read and write and do math in their own language for 4 years, and then another group just cold turkey doing it in French. And then we joined them together in a study back to 5th grade, and the ones that started out in their own language, you only learn to read once in your life. The second time, the next language is, you're not learning to read again, right? You're just deciphering new stuff.
Yep.
So they were way ahead of the kids that started out just cold turkey in French, which they didn't use at home.
Yeah, that makes sense. What's the culture like there in the Ivory Coast?
We're on the 5-6 degrees north of the equator, so it's very hot and humid. Our area is very rainforest. So people, when we were there in the 80s, late 80s, early 90s, when we started out, everybody was raising rice. They would slash and burn, put in rice. So the village was, you go out to the fields in the morning. The men go to the palm wine tree, come back in the evening. The women actually are out there working too. The little girls are with their moms helping in the villages. Our daughter, we have a daughter that was 6 months when we moved into the village, and she didn't have many friends because the girls were always with their moms, and the little boys were always just running around, throughout the village. So my boys had a lot of playing outside with other boys. But you have people pounding rice in the evenings in the village and dehusking the rice in their mortars and cooking. And it's a lot of the religion-wise, it's animism. The traditional religion in the area is animistic, believing the spirits in body rocks and trees and people. And then there's a great fear of the spirit world and departed ancestors and departed enemies, because their spirits sometimes stick around to get revenge in their minds, and so they're always seeking charms to protect themselves from the spirit world. And there's a great fear there. That's
something I came up against in Zambia, is the ATR, African traditional religion, yes, and the belief that there's spirits and everything. So my car isn't working. It's clearly because I have a demon in the car, not because I haven't put gas in it for forever.
Absolutely. And one of the things that really bothered me is that they say white man uses witchcraft to make airplanes, and black man uses witchcraft to kill each other, and they really believe that. And I had to say, no, the sinfulness of God's sinfulness of mankind across the board, white, black, yellow. That's the cause of the evil in the world.
Yes. There. What were the struggles you ran into regarding that, as far as trying to convert these people to Christianity? Did many of them think that they were Christian?
Yeah, yes. Many did. Many did think they were Christian, and one of the things we noticed when we were building our house in the village, we lived just outside, across the river from the Bakwe area, and we were in a town, in a Christian Missionary Alliance house. And one of the things we noticed is that a lot of the CMA villagers would stop by. They'd come to church, give themselves to Christ at the CMA church. On the way home, they want a prayer from the missionary. So they come to our house, because we were in the missionary's house while he was gone. And we were gratefully, renting it from them while we were building our house in the village. And I'd ask them, okay, I'll pray for you, but tell me your testimony, how you came to Christ. And it was always, almost 99%, it was like I was being hexed by somebody, and I really wanted, and I found out God is God is a bigger fetish and stronger magic. Jesus has stronger magic, so I became a Christian. With sin was absent, and the need to repent was not talked about, and so people then start coming to church thinking they're Christians because they gave their life to Christ, or they had a deliverance ceremony and they got better. They were sick and they were being hexed by somebody. And then as they're coming to church, it's sort of a works righteousness thing at that point. As they're coming to church, then all of a sudden one day the lights come on. They hear the gospel somewhere by mistake, in a way. And because I think it's predominant in our area there, a lot of bad teaching. And I just pray that the scriptures in their own language is going to create havoc and cause people to ask questions of their pastors and say, wait a minute, it doesn't say that here in the Bible.
How large was the community you were working in and with? We're
36 villages in the Bakwe area, about 150-mile triangle kind of area in the forest, and with the main road going through it. 14,000 is a generous amount. So,
okay.
Yeah,
not huge.
Not huge. Yeah.
Yeah.
Feasible to get
right.
To get everybody the scriptures, and everybody knows, and everybody can't, no excuses after.
Yeah.
Right?
You also mentioned that they harvested rice.
Yes.
Correct.
Yeah.
How did I would assume that kind of translated in that they were very agricultural throughout the rest of their life. Is that correct?
Agriculture and hunting, and not animal husbandry. No, they were not. They just let the animals run around.
Got it.
But rice was the big thing, and cash crop was cacao, chocolate.
Yeah.
So everybody has a little chocolate, and this is a long story, but I'm not going to go into it. But just so you know, they had vast acres of forest from the 70s on, because the whole area was underdeveloped until the 70s, late 60s. The road finally was paved through the area, so the Bakwe started to see, the government started encouraging other tribes to move into the Bakwe area, and the Bakwe saw an opportunity. I'll sell this guy, put in 4 hectares of chocolate for me, and you can have 4 hectares. And the foreigner comes, and the Bakwe stays in the village, and the guy takes 20 hectares because the Bakwe doesn't go out and check on the foreigner. And then finally, the Bakwe is basically saying, listen, you took advantage of me. And in some ways, he wanted it to happen, because then he can start living off of that guy and say, listen, because you did that, now I'm going to, you have to give me money every month, or you have to, give me something. So they became sort of lazy, and then all of a sudden, all the land is used up, and the foreigners that are in the area now are richer and doing better than the Bakwe. So hunters and gatherers, I think, have a challenge because they're not used to having to get the crops in before the season is over and winter is there, right? they can go out in the forest, and the snails are this big, and they can't run away, and you can pick them up and you can shoot the animals, and they had it easy being hunters and gatherers. The people further to the north in the drier areas towards the Sahel and the desert, the rain only comes in a real small window, and if you don't have your fields ready for that, you're not going to eat your family. You're going to die, you're going to starve. So everybody is really hard workers from the north, but down here in this area in the south, people are not as hard because
there's more abundance.
There's more abundance. Yeah, exactly.
Did you ever have people that converted to Christianity because they believed that God would help them in their hunting / gathering
activities?
Yeah.
I've seen that. Yeah, people seeing the effectiveness of others and saying, okay, God's going to bless me if I come to Christ. But a lot of the people that we've seen come to Christ over there have been either sick, or they'll and then they start listening. They have something bad happen, and they're fearful of being somebody's putting a hex on them or doing sorcery, and they just want someone stronger. And we preach that God is stronger. When Christ says, "Don't fear he who can kill the body." Only, it's because the body and the soul. So only God actually has our time in his hands. Yeah, so people have come to Christ for different reasons, and we're seeing more and more, fewer and fewer people that are as fearful as they used to be, although it's still prevalent. When we first got to the village, it was there was drums and people going into trances every middle of the week, every week, and finally we were able to get that out of the village. We chased those guys out that were doing that. They were anyhow. There's when we first started the church there, we were not allowed to use drums because there were some rules in the village, and we broke those rules and kept using the drums anyway because it was the only instrument that they have that they use a lot. But the new Christians didn't want to use drums, and the Harris church that was in the village, the traditional ATR church, didn't want us to use drums because they associated the drums with the spirit world stuff that went on. But we basically redeemed the drums, and the Protestant church is using drums all the time now. And but when we first started, they said we couldn't use drums, but we did it anyway, and
never looked back.
Never looked back. Yeah, and now today there's 2 churches in the small village that we're in, and probably 300 churches throughout the Bakwe area that are not ATR churches.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah. Why do you think Africa is not prosperous?
That's a big question. There's probably a lot of reasons, and corruption is huge. You compare the Ivory Coast and where the gospel went and who brought the gospel. Comparing Ivory Coast with Ghana. Ghana is the British went to. A lot of Protestants went there. Ivory Coast, French, a lot of Catholics came to Ivory Coast as the first missionaries. And Ghana is doing really well. I sent one of my coworkers over to Ghana to learn English, and he crossed the border and he couldn't believe he was in Africa. He says, you can't just go relieve yourself by the tree. You get a fine if you do that in Ghana. You can't just toss the banana peel out the window. You get fined if there's trash. They see you throwing trash out. The cleanliness is a huge value in Ghana, and in Ivory Coast, when a Bakwe starts to be prosperous, they say, "Oh, you're a Ghanaian." There's even this. So I think Christianity makes a huge difference. And where the Protestants went, there was more impact, I think, on actual culture. and where the French went, the French culture kind of impacted them, but not necessarily the Christian side of it.
Why is that the British Protestants were more successful?
I'd have to look into the history of it, but I think the French. Here's one of the differences: the Protestants, wherever the Protestants went, they translated the Bible. Where the French have gone, it was just listen to us. We'll teach you the God's language, French.
Yeah.
So they colonized and forced everybody to learn French. And that's another thing. People say, well, why don't you just teach people French? I say, well, they've had 100+ years now of the French experiment. And people, if you take the average level of education, second grade in the country. There's a lot of elites that are PhDs and they use French really well. They're in command, they're in the cities and everybody wants to get that kind of a job. But the vast majority have been using French and it just hasn't worked. Ghana, it's been different.
Yeah. Why, when you're dealing with things like the witch doctors and such,
Mm-hmm.
how much of that is real in a sense, and how much of it is just for show?
I do believe a lot of it's for show, but I do believe also that Satan deceives people and uses people to deceive. He's the father of lies, the scripture says, and we're never told to fear his power, but we're told to fear his wiles, right? We're told to fear God, but we're not told to fear Satan. But so Satan really has lied to people and has for years basically kept them in fear. So a witch doctor, I believe in some cases they do supernatural stuff that is satanic and we don't understand it. But a lot of it is they have to reinforce. And I'll tell you an example. This one group was coming in to try to save the village and say all the deaths that have been happening in the village are because there are sorcerers in the village. And they said they can find this lady who is a cripple, could find with her people where the buried fetishes are and then get rid of them and then accuse the people that were bearing those fetishes in the village. So they go into this trance, and there's this belief too that if you're crippled, oftentimes the reason why you're crippled is because you've taken your power and used it for something else. You've taken it out of your legs or your body, and now you're using it in the supernatural way.
In the spirit realm.
In the spirit realm.
Got it.
And they started going to trances, and these two guys ran around the village with a gun, naked, just buck naked, running around the village daylight with a gun, looking for in a trance. I mean, they're completely possessed. They're running around and stumbling, acting possessed anyway. They're stumbling around looking for this thing that supposedly is traveling through the ground. And for 3 or 4 hours in the hot sun, the crowds are following them. And then all of a sudden, there's fewer and fewer following them. And then all of a sudden, you hear the gun go off, and there is nobody with them. And all of a sudden, they dig up something, and they bring it back, and everybody goes, wow, this is... And some of our Christians started noticing that the thing that they're digging up in this village was the same thing they dug up in another village. And how come it was always not dirty? It didn't have dirt all over it. And they would say, well, we just washed it, but it wasn't wet either. So they started noticing this going on, and just, they're using that as a ruse, basically, to continue to deceive the people and get money for it. So when we first moved to the village, someone said that the coconut trees, the sorcerers were meeting at night in the coconut trees. And so they cut down all the coconut trees in the village. It's just like all this source of protein and goodness for the kids. After school, they'd come and they'd knock down coconuts. They just cut it all down. And the death kept going. And I told them, I said, that's why we're here. We're here to translate the scriptures so you can understand what is the truth, because that's not going to get rid of evil, the people that are hexing each other and doing stuff. And even that hexing stuff is, there's a lot of it that I've seen was poisoning. I took so many people to the doctors that believed that they were hexed and that they ate human flesh or something like that, and their stomach starts swelling and they can't They can't throw up. They can't. Everything's just
Stuck.
and it turns out it's poisoning. And
Wow.
so many people, over the years that was my language learning, is running people to the doctor and
Yeah.
in the hospital.
So, well, through 3 to 4 hours is an impressive shift to run around in the African sun. It's pretty wild.
Oh, yeah.
How did you fight that? Did you try and like, hey, logically this cannot be true because
Right.
or was it a different approach that you took?
Well, in that situation, we encouraged some of the Christians. We met together there was just a small group of Christians at that point. We encouraged them to go complain to the authorities in the township. Because this lady, I knew that this lady that was doing this was not really, the government was not happy with what was going on around, and basically, unless people did something about it, they would just stay and they would get away with it. So we actually got her kicked out of the village because of that. And changing people's minds, in terms of, it really has to come from the heart. People have to understand what Scripture says about sin and greed, and confession has to happen, and then peace. And we see when people come to Christ, all of a sudden there's this freedom from all that fear. People start walking at night in the village without fear. God has got my days numbered, and he basically, he knows when I'm going to die. And our cook, who's a charismatic guy, he one night he's walking through the village and playing his guitar throughout the village at night, and he has this pig just charge him. I don't know if it was a wild pig or something, but it just started charging him. And he turns around to the pig and says, "In the name of Jesus, stop!" And the pig goes, stops and takes off. And he's a charismatic, so he knew that was a possessed pig, a satanic pig, and all that. Of course. But the freedom anyway of the people that do find the truth is just amazing. And then others see that and want it, and they start asking questions, and then people get to share the gospel and share what freed them, and that God and His Son Christ, and the sacrifice of Christ is the answer for their sin.
Why were they scared to walk around at night?
Yeah, because of sorcery.
Did they just believe that at night the sorcery came out of the bushes and?
Yeah, spirits and evil. Yeah, they believe that owls are, the Bakwe believe that owls are people that have sorcerers that have transformed into the shape of an owl.
Got it.
And part of that is because owls, when they fly past you, you can't hear them, right? Their feathers, they're really quiet, and they can see in the dark. That's weird, right? All this stuff it's got to be sorcery. It's got to be. So if an owl lands in a tree above your house, as a Bakwe, the traditional religion, they say the man of the house has to go outside and yell, "I hear you. I see you up in that tree. You don't meet here, you sorcerer," and basically tell it off and make it go away. And they really believe that that's a shapeshifter. Seriously, and somebody said to me, "Well, have you ever seen someone who's sound asleep at night and you try to wake him up and you can't wake him up? That's because he left his body and he's off shape-shifting." And then they start if that happened, they start suspecting that guy and fearing the guy who couldn't wake up when he was sleeping at night. And then people start backing away from that guy. And all of a sudden you have this suspicion, and then they'll start, get to the point where a retarded person in the village, someone who is mentally handicapped, will start getting ostracized and eventually killed because they believe that he's doing sorcery. And I could tell you stories about that. It's very sad.
Yeah, that's awful. Were you ever able to catch an owl and look, it's just a bird?
No, I haven't. Owls are hard. Yeah, no, I haven't.
Yeah, I would imagine that'd be tough. But
but in the morning, he's still a bird. After all that, hold him all night. That would be cool.
Yeah. No,
I did have a missionary come through who knew how to do magic. It was really good. So he says, gather your guys around. I want to show this. And he says, and I'll tell him the trick afterwards.
Yeah.
And so he has this orange. He pulls it out. He has me get an orange out of a big bag, and I get the orange and I bring it over. And he says, I'm going to put this and make it disappear. Tell them. So I explain what's going to happen. And he puts the handkerchief over the orange. No, he stuffs it into the orange. And anyhow, I forget how it was, but he made the thing disappear. And these Christians around me, one of them dropped to the ground. Just his knees went weak, and he fell to the ground. And and it was basically a false thumb. I guess he made the handkerchief disappear in a false thumb.
Got it. Yeah.
But this other the Christians that were watching, a couple other guys, they were like, they didn't fall to the ground, but they're like super, like, this is not cool. This guy's a sorcerer. This guy's a witch.
What have you done?
Yeah, exactly. And so the missionary was going to take off. He said, I'll leave. And I said, no, you can't leave. You got to tell them. And so he shows them, and they just start laughing uncontrollably. Like, how could we were just duped? And then the missionary goes on to tell them that, this is what a lot of the sorcery that does go on is like this, where they're duping you. And Satan's the father of lies. And in Christ, he has no power over us.
Why do you think they're so susceptible to that?
Well, there's a lot of, you think the village is a happy place, and that everybody's doing good, but there's a lot of sin and hatred and people trying to do each other in, and jealousy and envy. One person gets ahead of another, then they start going after him. There's this belief that in a lot of West African countries, a lot of cultures, that there's a limited supply of good in the world. And if one of the group has more than the others and he starts to get successful, that means my crops are going to fail. Because he's taking more of the good. And they start tearing down. So they'll start poisoning, they'll kill that guy, they'll do sorcery, and they'll try to take him down. They'll go to a witch doctor to try to put a hex on him. And basically, I don't believe that it's always the case where spiritually something happens, but there is something where the guy he gets poisoned or something happens to the person. He finally dies, and sometimes fear kills him too, because he realizes someone's after me, and it's paralyzing fear. I mean, I've seen that paralyzing fear when you don't have Christ out there, where people actually, when they get delivered from that and they realize I'm really not sick, that was all in my head. I was wasting away because I had this fear, Satan in his lies again. But so people try to not stick out. They try to all stay down at this low level of existence and hide their wealth. So you have this animosity back and forth and envy, and so they're always. Yeah, it's an unhappy culture.
But there's similar things going on in America. Like, people are jealous here too, and envious and angry and upset.
Sure.
But Americans are far less susceptible to, if I walked up to someone that said, I don't like you, and I put a spell on you,
right,
most likely that person would laugh me off.
Right.
Whereas there, they seem to be and I dealt with this in Zambia as well,
mm-hmm.
but they're much more open to accepting the fact that may have actually happened and be the source of the problems.
Right. Yeah. And some envy can take different forms. Here, it's still envy, right? But so you see your neighbor got a boat, and you want a boat, and you're envious of his boat. Well, you work harder and you get a boat, right? Where over there, you take out your neighbor. You don't want
much simpler.
It's a simpler, yeah.
Yeah.
So it's still envy. It's still sin. It's wrong. How it expresses itself is different. And as prosperity is coming to Ivory Coast and to villages, when we first got there, everything was mud and stick in the village, pretty much. There's a couple of cement houses. Now most of the houses are cinder block. They've risen up a little bit more and become more prosperous, and there's less of fear of so. And it's not just because of Christianity. I think that has had an impact on them. They're not so insular anymore. They're being exposed to other things, but the envy is still there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Were there people that were averse to your Bible translation, and were you ever actually in danger from them?
Not well. We went on furlough. Two missionaries came in to do some language work from Wycliffe in our village, and the chief, who hadn't become a Christian yet, buried a fetish out the back to try to win them over. And our cook, who discovered the fetish and dug it up.
A fetish being like an idol?
It was elephant's teeth. I got it here somewhere. Elephant's molars that were wrapped with women's underwear and hair and all kinds of stuff, medicine.
Yes, of course.
And they buried this, and he thought, okay, I'm going to win them over. And he would never come to the front door. He would always go to the back door, knock, and try to visit them. And he was trying to win them over. I don't know, as wives or as what, but
that was the way to court someone. Was I would like to drop off this elephant's tooth covered in hair,
bury it at nighttime, and then see what power I
need to start trying that.
Yeah. So we showed some young men that later, the elephant tooth, and told them what had happened, and these young guys' eyes got big. Well, I told them about it, and they said, "Can we see it?" And I take them over to the house and I show it to them. They said, "That's really strong medicine." I said, "Well, it didn't work."
Clearly not strong enough.
Not strong enough.
Yeah. But were you ever actually in danger?
No. The worst was when we went through Civil War and had to evacuate out of the country. That was probably the scariest. And the malaria that we would get, and our kids getting sick. We had not from the people. Not from the people. We felt really safe in the village with the people. And I think being an outsider of a different culture and a Christian coming into the village, people kind of assume that we're not part of their network of sin and all this. And so we were living right on the edge of the village, so we could hear everything. Right, our neighbors weren't too far away, but we didn't. Our cook, who was a Christian, his life was attempted at many times, and
really
he had so many things, and some of it I have to say that since he's charismatic, sometimes his interpretation of events is different than my interpretation of what actually happened.
Yep.
But while we were gone once, he went to the sacred forest and started cutting down the trees to build my office.
Good for him.
So I told him I need an office, and usually you build with small saplings, maybe about that round, right? Mm-hmm. And then you pack it with mud and vines. You make a sort of a stucco wall and packing the mud on it. Well, this cook, he's a man of God. He doesn't do anything 100%. It's 150 all the time. So my wife asked him to wash the chicken once, and he's got laundry detergent all over washing this chicken in order to get it ready for dinner, and it's got suds all over it, and he's scrubbing it. It's like, come on, that's not what we do.
That's fantastic.
But anyhow, he cut down these trees. He didn't realize, but he might have known. He might have had suspicion that it was, but he's not fearful. Went down there, cut down the trees. I get back to the village. Everybody's like wondering, is he going to die? And I get back to the village, and the elders come to me and tell me to come to the chief because something bad happened. And I was on trial. Basically, they're saying, did you tell your cook to go cut these trees down there? And I said, well, I told him to build an office, but I didn't tell us to cut those trees. I don't know where he got the trees. He said, well... And then this long questions, they beat around the bush for a while, and finally I found out what really was it. And I said, listen, we're not afraid. God will protect him. If your genie or whoever is in part of that sacred forest, your God, if he tries to do anything, John V is a Christian, our cook is a Christian, and nothing's going to harm him. He'll be fine. And people they said, okay, we'll wait and see. And when those kind of situations happen, you still are careful who you eat with and what you eat.
Yep.
Right. So he was careful, and nothing happened. Yeah.
And but there was not an attempt on his life there.
Not attempt on his life that we know of.
Yeah. They have sacred trees though.
Yeah. They had a sacred forest. Yeah.
What? How does that come about?
Well, in this grove of trees was the first spring of water that the village found when they built the village.
Got it.
And it's water coming out of a rock, and that's weird to people.
I guess.
I guess, until you understand hydrology and how the world works, right? But just the fact that this water is coming out of this rock and it's always there, it's just, okay, this is our genie. And I think in some situations, the village elders know that, okay, that place is going to get destroyed if we just let people go there all the time, and then our water's going to get messed up. So the elders know that, well, if we say this, then it's going to be a special place and nobody will bother it for a long time. And I know that happens. My cook grew up, he's amazing, just amazing. But he grew up as an orphan in a village. His mom died up in Burkina Faso. And as a kid, when your mom dies and your dad dies, you get basically, your mom remarries to another village and you're stuck as the slave of the family, the extended family. So he wouldn't get anything to eat often. They would just really abuse him. He would have to wash all the dishes. And they told him, no one's supposed to go out to this swamp that has these huge fish in it because it's a sacred swamp. And if you go there, they'll kill you, you'll die. And he was like, I'm going to go there. And he's like 10 years old and he's hungry. He said, I'm going to check out whether I'll die or not. I'm going to die anyway.
What's the worst that can happen?
Yeah, what's the worst that can happen? And he goes out there and he starts eating these fish. And every day, he comes back and people are wondering why he's not hungry and he's not dying. And he realizes they lied to me. And he keeps doing these things and challenging their all the different. And finally, he finds Christ he walked into a Catholic little chapel, off stick chapel in a village nearby, and he sees the crucifix up on the pulpit up front. He goes up to her and he sees this man that's dying and being thrown, and then he's like, why? And when he was told the story, he all of a sudden he knew that this was the right religion, right? That God's Son came, he died for me. He didn't understand anything else. That was all he understood. And that was the start of his awakening to his sin and then to Christ as being his Savior. But and he's today, he's amazing. My son-in-law Kellen and my daughter son-in-law named their first boy Janvier after him.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Yeah. Were you a fan of the fact that he cut down the sacred trees, like it or not?
I mean, I thought, well, this is going to be a testimony to the power of God.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. And I wouldn't have told him to go and cut down the sacred forest. I think there's a time for that sort of thing, but I think but it's nice that it happened to just create that confrontation and that right. Situation where, okay, he didn't die. So what's going on with our genie? He's not very strong,
Was there a literal genie in the forest?
They call it that, but spirit basically is what it would be.
Got it.
And I don't know. We've walked through it.
Never saw him.
Never saw him.
What was the situation with the Civil War?
So we had come back to the States and we were headed back to Ivory Coast. We got to basically when we got back there. It's a long story, but the country was divided. The North was fighting the South, and there was a demilitarized zone between the two. The French and peacekeeping forces were keeping the North and the South from fighting. And the French happened to bomb the South got some Ukrainian jets and Ukrainian pilots to do, and they bombed the North. And they happened to hit some French installations and killed some French in the North in the barracks. They're trying to bomb a ammunition depot, and they killed some French. An aircraft carrier off the coast French, sent in there and just took out the entire Air Force, all those planes. And the young patriots of the South took over all the radio stations and started just attacking anything French. They're looting stores, they're raping, they're through the South. Our village, we were not yet in the village. Had we reached the village, we would have been safe in the village because we're known, right? But people know we're not French. But we're in this an hour south in a port town where there was a lot of French, and we basically had mobs coming down and get really close to us. We had our wife. There's another missionary family there. We were at a Christian Missionary Alliance guest house, waiting. The next day we were supposed to go up to the village. We had made the trek across the coast from the capital city, and we're going to go up to the village now. And the young patriots are just attacking anything. And we had a guard that was going from the guest house into the mobs and coming and telling us what was happening. They're planning to hit everything. And mobs don't ask you for your passport to see whether you're French or
you're white.
You're white. You're game.
You're French.
So we were told to evacuate, and we had to get out of there. There was a point in time where I was at the front door with the other missionary, and I was more worried about this other missionary because he was like a redneck on steroids. I mean, he was like double-headed axe. I'm going to kill whoever comes over that fence. I'm going to just take, and I'm going, I had a machete, and I'm like, let me talk to him first. Let me try to get out there, and I'll start talking to him. Just don't kill us. You're going to kill us if you start attacking people. But we had our kids and our wives in the back part of the property. There was a wall around this big, concession. And in the back was jungle, and there's a back door to go out to the garbage pile where we burn the garbage. And so we had them sleep with all their shoes on, their clothes on, and we had a little walkie-talkie. We said, when we heard them getting closer, we had them go out the back door into the forest and just wait for us, because we were going to flee out into the forest. If the mobs came, just let them loot the place. And I was hoping I could keep this guy from getting us killed. And so that night, the crowds had come down the beach, and they had run into a hotel and found a huge liquor stash. So they were just all plastered. And
yep.
So that night, we went out the next day and saw the debris. And there was a lot of looting that went on. But and we got a few supplies, thinking, okay, the next night, maybe we'll be able to get out of here. But the evacuation flights and the roads were unsafe to be on because there were barricades all the way to the capital city, about a 7-hour trip. And the next night, our guard said, I was in the village and out in the village, and they're going to do it again tonight. They're going to come and finish the rest of the beach down the coast. They had hit the day before, they had hit some other missionary families and basically banged up. They were safe, but they had tried to loot and didn't get through the gates. But who knows for the next night what was going to happen. So we went out and found some of the military and asked them to come and guard that road. And the next night we were fine. And then the government got control of what was going on, and they slowly calmed everybody down. Anyhow, it was a long story, but we had to drive, actually, which was surreal, driving through all these barricades and all the debris on the road, the burnt tires, all the way back to the city, the capital city, through all these villages along the way, along the coastal highway. And as we head out in the morning, there's some guys just on the road, and we're driving by, and I'm going, oh, they're going to try to stop our car. And when they noticed us coming, I just kept up the speed, and they hit the truck on the back of the truck as we went by. Someone tried to whack it or do something, but we got through it. We got to the outskirts of town. It was still dark because we wanted to get down to Abidjan as fast as we could. And we get to the edge of town, and the military says, you can't go yet. The young patriots up ahead, there's a barricade up there on the coastal highway, and we could see it. It was like within a stone's throw, but it was dark. And they said, we won't let you go until it's light. So as it got light, they said, okay, you can go. And still like, we're praying, Lord, protect us. So we get closer to the barricade, and I decide I'm going to just stop and walk out to these guys. So everybody, my kids and my wife are in the car, and I walked out to the barricade. The other car is behind us with the other missionary family. And I don't know, I just started speaking Bakwe. I yelled out, and this is not in the Bakwe area, we're south of it. But I just started speaking Bakwe to the guys and greeted them in Bakwe, and all of a sudden this guy says my name, Saro, Ayo. And I go, Woo, Nabiziniwo. And then he gives me his name, and I talk to him. He says, oh, he had never known me, but he had heard about a white man who spoke Bakwe. And I just spoke Bakwe thinking, maybe somebody will know that I'm not a French, and because I speak the language, and I'm a missionary. And this guy it was just like a bond right there. And he said, oh, these guys won't harm you. There's no problem here. You will let you go. Just give us a little money for coffee. We're tired. We're hungry. We've been guarding this road, So they let us go through, and we headed down the way. And all the way it was just praying along the way the whole way. But we didn't have any trouble that day. The people had been exhausted from the night of looting. But there was debris all over, bricks on the road. You had to be careful where you're going. Yeah.
Dodge and weave.
Yeah.
Wow. So you didn't actually ever have to leave the country.
Yes, we did. Then from there, we got out to the international airport, and the French and the Foreign Legion had come in and captured the airport and made it French territory for evacuation, basically against the government's will. They took over the airport, and we're driving up to the airport, and there's two containers like this, and this big, huge, you could see it from a distance as we're driving down this long road towards them. A scope pointed at us, and we could see the glint on this big, the scope was probably that big because it was really, and this military French was on top of that, just pointing it down the road, trying to see who's coming. And so we finally got there in the airport. We got evacuated out to Togo, to Ghana, and then we spent a night in Ghana, into Togo, and then eventually Wycliffe said, come up to Bamako, Mali, the country to the north. One of the countries to the north where Wycliffe had a big center. And that's where we had to spend the next 22 months before my wife was shot. She had chronic fatigue before this and had typhoid before that. And so she was physically it was really hard.
22 months.
Yeah, we were up there for almost 2 years.
Why that long?
It was unsafe to come back down to the area. Wycliffe wouldn't allow us to come in. I made one trip in, but only after Wycliffe deemed that it was okay just for me to go in and button down the house, and then but they wanted us all to stay up in Bamako. So I started flying my language team, my translator coworkers, Bakwe guys, on a local flight up into Bamako, and we would work together up there. And then they'd fly back, and that was an experience for them to get in a plane and fly a jet and fly. That was just insane for them. It was just yeah. I'll tell you my interesting story. My Bakwe coworker, the best translator colleague, speaks his languages tremendous, just really good. He had never seen the ocean. He had never seen a flush toilet, and he taught me how to use my first cell phone. Because he got cell phones while we were on furlough. Cell phones hit the country. I come back from traveling through Heathrow in England to pick up I bought a GSM cell phone in Heathrow because it's the same frequency they use in Europe as in Ivory Coast. So I bring this phone back. I don't know how to use it, and he teaches me how to use my phone, and I taught him how to use a flush toilet.
Hey, gotta help someone out.
It's a crazy world, yeah.
But you would have been safe in the village, correct? Yeah.
During part of it, during that period, yes. Later on, we actually were in communication with our guys there, and at one point, they thought the missionary's house has an arms depot in it, and the rebels had come through and had basically threatened to kill someone every day that the house wasn't opened. So I get this call in the middle of the night on my cell phone. I'm outside of the country, and they're like, "What do we do?" And I say, "Break the door down. There's nothing in there. Let them see." And they ended up not doing that, and somehow something happened, and the rebels weren't able to. They weren't able to come back and check on it. But anyhow, there was something. I mean, we didn't have a depot of ammunition and that sort of thing hiding in there, but we ended up having the house just there's bullet marks on the office, bullets that went into the cement wall. But if we had been there, we might have been taken hostage, that sort of thing, and in danger. But thank God we were not.
Yeah, absolutely.
They're Bakwe that were killed. The village, the chief was killed of our village.
Oh, wow.
And then further, the Northerners actually came down and basically terrorized after the French. After this all went down and they chased the Southern president out of the country, the North took over, and a lot of them were Muslim, not sort of a African traditional Muslim, syncretistic Muslim culture to the North, and they basically took over the South, and the South is still being dominated by them over there.
Wow. Did you ever regret not staying with the villagers?
I did. I really did. Wycliffe wouldn't let us, and we had signed an agreement with Wycliffe that we would never have Wycliffe pay for kidnapping, pay kidnappers. We also signed an agreement that said that if they called the shots for us to leave the country, we would comply with it.
Yep.
Because they've had other places in the world where the missionary didn't want to leave and they lost their lives. So it's like, okay. But I felt bad, and we get to the airport for evacuation, the evacuation flight, and I'm in the airport and just wandering around thinking, I just feel this is not a good testimony. And I run into a police officer, Ivorian, who was from the town that we lived in while we were building our house outside of the area. He was now down in the city working, and he saw me. He says, "Missionary," and then he was a Christian from the Assemblies of God Church, and he basically walks me around in the back, and we see all the pup tents for the Foreign Legion. They're all there, and inside the waiting room, all the departure lounges were pup tents for all the Foreign Legion that had come in to help with the evacuation. And he walks me through all this stuff, and he just encourages me and says, "No, you're doing the right thing. If you don't leave, then we can't take care of our families because we're worried about you, and our families are going to want us to be taking care of you." And there's this conflict of interest. Conflict of interest. So you guys leaving is the best thing for us.
Yeah.
At this point. So
you spoke a little bit of Bakwe earlier. How do you translate that and perform analysis on a language such as, you spoke and it just sounded like sounds.
Yeah. Well, it's just English sounds the same thing to a Bakwe.
This is true.
It's really difficult because at first you don't know where the morpheme breaks are, where the meaningful unit breaks are. What's the plural suffix and what isn't, right?
Right.
And in Bakwe also you have. So early on, oftentimes you just write what you hear. You don't know where the word breaks are completely, but phonetically you write it down, and then you start doing analysis on it. Nabo, 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 nabo. There's a difference in there.
Right.
Na, 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 na. Na means mine, and na means yours. Na, na. So tone. There's a high tone, and there's a lower tone. So,
got it.
And then they also have gliding tones, but you just start analyzing. We're taught how to pick it apart, and then you start testing out your analysis, your hypothesis that this is the plural. It turns out in Bakwe there's vestiges of a noun class system, and just vestiges of a noun class system. So there's a lot of words that you can. Okay, this family of verbs of words nouns takes this kind of suffix for plural. So human and birds are considered in that class of human things. It's interesting. Maybe that's why they can fly and they can shapeshift into birds.
Yeah, potentially.
So is he or she or it, and if it's an animal, it's eh. But if it's an inanimate object, tulu, table, tulu, and that's for the plural. So even so you had to learn all of that, and you start seeing patterns and writing it down. And I had a computer, a laptop. My first laptop was an LCD screen about that wide, tall and wide, and on battery power. We had a solar panel when the first 10 years we lived on that, and just analyzing and testing out your hypothesis, going out and we learned the language so that I could go out and practice it with the folks. And you had to. So my first 3 years probably was just spent going to the farms, going hunting, going off to the fields with the men, sitting in the villages, going to funerals, sitting around, listening and talking and writing down. I had a microphone and a Walkman kind of recorder, recording everything that I was hearing. So, and then of course Wycliffe, we don't work alone. So I have consultants that are in the city with Wycliffe, and they're helping other languages as well. And they're helping me analyze, they're giving me advice. And then oftentimes if a related language to your language that you're working in and learning, if the other language has received the scriptures or a written language and has someone that has done the analysis, usually there are similarities with the same language family. So I can expect to find this pattern in Bakwe because of these related languages. So we did a lot of research that way to figure out, okay, we must have that. So I look for it. Oh yeah, we do have it. It's different, but it follows the same sort of pattern.
General pattern, yeah.
General pattern, yeah. Like romance languages. Like,
yeah.
Yeah.
Are you using English letters for this, or do they have their own set of alphabet?
No, we're using Latin-based English. So, but letters that would work for them to learn French. So I would say probably 90% of the letters in the language, if an F is an F, a P is a P, and all the consonants that we have bridge over into French. Bakwe has 13 vowels though, and French doesn't have that many vowels. So we had to, there's a vowel system where you have your tongue is advanced in your mouth, and then there's another set that's further back and tightened in the back of your mouth. And we had to learn that. That's a little different. But there's still a U, the regular oo, that would be U, and would be the 2 dots. So the 2 dots on top means you tighten it. And o, oo, oo, So
Got it. Yeah.
It's a different system, and it's basically you're pulling back in your mouth and tightening it. And that was really hard. And the tone has been hard.
Yes, I can imagine that tonal language. Did you have any troubles where you were like physically unable to actually say these?
Yeah, or
things?
saying the wrong thing. I once introduced my wife to a chief as "Here's your wife," and I said, "Here's my wife." I wanted to say "Here's my wife," but it's that difference between nah,
yeah,
and they're laugh because they know I wasn't giving my wife away, right?
Yes,
but it's just like, oh. Or there's sometimes you say a swear word, or you say a word that everybody laughs. They know that that's not
what you meant.
I was early on walking around the village telling people would always ask me, "What are you doing?" And I'm writing things down, and I asked my coworker, what do I tell them I'm doing? Because they keep asking me after I give the news. I say, "I'm doing fine. What's your name?" And I'd start learning a few things. And then people would ask me, "What are you doing?" And I'll say, what do I tell them? So I asked my language helper, and he said, I said, "I want to tell them I'm studying your language." He said, "Well, we don't study our language. We just learn to speak it." So don't say that. Just tell them you're strolling around the village. So I learned, okay, what's wrong with that? But it turns out that strolling, there's 3 different things, P, P, P. And I had picked the one sleeping, the tone, a wrong tone. So I'm going around telling P, 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 P. And there's like sleeping, I'm sleeping. And they're like, laugh and laugh and laugh. And I think I'm telling them that I'm strolling, and you never know it.
They must have thought you were hilarious.
Yeah,
They're like, we've been given a stand-up comic.
And that's the humiliating thing about learning a language like that.
Yeah, I can imagine.
You have to be happy to laugh at yourself and be made a fool of.
Yes, for a long period of time. Yeah. What were your best and worst experiences in the whole translation process?
Yeah, I think one of the best experiences was having that chief's wife come and say, thank you for coming and translating the Gospel of John for us. At that point, we only had the Gospel of John and Mark, and we had printed it already out for people to learn to use it, and that had learned how to read. And that just really encouraged us that we were there God was using it. Seeing that kind of, it's been discouraging, and in many times it's been discouraging that it hasn't gone faster. The catching on to reading hasn't gone faster. That more people haven't, and we're not seeing huge fruit that we'd like to see. Right? Every village knows that we're there and that we've translated the scriptures, but not every village has bought copies of this scripture. You have people here and there. So that's been discouraging. So when you see those examples of those people that are coming to Christ and that are using the scriptures, that's really encouraging. Probably my seeing a young man whose mother lived right next to us, was horrible mother, horrible. She was not a happy woman when we moved in. She had been kicked out by her husband from another village and came back to her village. This young boy grew up there, and he came to Christ with us. It calls me his spiritual father. We helped him get to Bible school. He's now a pastor, and seeing him go for it, and then he wanted to join the translation work as my second translator. So he's pastoring a church, and he's also helping us with Old Testament translation. Seeing that, people, it's your Peter, James, and John. One. Okay, I don't have hundreds that are impacted that I see with my eyes, but the close ones in that I've had a chance to impact is very encouraging.
How did you print out the Bible?
We ended up, for the New Testament, we ended up sending it to Korea, South Korea.
Really?
Yeah. We sent off the files to South Korea, and they print, and then they ship it by a container, and it comes into the port, and yeah.
And you have to go pick it up. Did you have to teach them, like, this U with the dots on top means this sound that you're making? Or did they somewhat intuitively understand that?
Yes, we had to teach it. Yeah, okay. We have books that we made for teaching it, and then the stories through the books you get harder and harder as you go along. The most predominant letter in the language is ah, so we had to find that out by their first recording their folk tales, and then doing a census of, okay, what's the most common letter? So you count all the letters, right? And you find out, and then what's the next most common one? And you slowly make your lessons track that pattern of most common, a few words, and then they're learning this U with the 2 dots is new, and there's a picture of eyes, plural, 2 eyes, new, and new is 1 eye, and new is 2 eyes, and it goes up, new, so you have to have 2 of those. And anyhow, we had to teach them how to write tone too, because in the Bakwe only need to know really at the start what tone it starts on. So na has a little single apostrophe straight that basically we teach using the finger and say, raise your voice. Na. When you see that means start up high. And na is, we say, lower your voice, and there's a little dash. And mid-tone is just nothing. So they and all we have to teach them is how to start the syllable, what tone it starts on. The rest of it, they know how to end it. Once they get that first road sign, the rest of it is easy.
Because the emphasis only, or the up or down only comes on the first part of the word?
It comes on the others, but there's not enough words that are similar. So how do I explain this? A native speaker, once they learn that first tone, and they see the rest, they know how to read the rest because they've learned to syllabize. They're gonna so we have two heights. It starts on a high tone. They know to drop it because and maybe the sentence has a context, right? And in the context, they know what the next one's going to be. Some people actually learn to read without even paying attention to those marks. They might hit it wrong first, and then they go over it again and read it. And they put the right tones in there because it's their language.
Right.
Yeah.
That's fascinating. I'm sure we could talk about this for a long time. Yeah.
Fun.
As we kind of wrap up here, I always like to ask, what's your best piece of advice for anyone watching?
Boy, looking back at my age now, 64, my wife and I are here, and we're looking back and say, what in the world did we think we were doing going over there? I mean, it was dangerous. It was medically, I could tell you all kinds of things. We were without electricity for 10 years, far from the hospital, and raised 4 kids there. I mean, and we had some people in Chicago telling us that we were abusing our kids by raising them there, homeschooling them in Africa. No playmates, or no Americans, and thought we were just really abusing our kids, and they stopped supporting us because of it.
Wow. And
we went back to that church, and anyhow, we defended ourselves, and they supported us half of what they did before. But anyhow, but I think about that and say, well, we felt strongly that God called us to the work, and He gave us the grace to do it. So God calls us to do hard things, and you just do it. You do it on His strength, and He gives you the power to do it. And you don't look back; you look up, and He gives that grace for that period of time. Now I don't have that. It's like, okay, that was crazy what we did back then, and I'm not sure at this state now. I would go into it like that, but at the time, and so God may call you to do something hard. And as he does, He gives you the peace and the ability to do it. He will, and He'll protect you. So I guess that's what I would say, and pray for Bible translation, because there's a lot of languages still in the world that, this is incredible. 2,000 years of church history, hundreds of years of African Christianity going to Africa, and still, languages that have not received the scriptures.
Yeah. Where can people find you and support that work and all of that?
Well, I'm at Christ Church here in Moscow, Idaho. So christkirk.com on the website, you see a bio for us and a way to support us. Through that, we're still under the auspices of Wycliffe Bible Translators, even though our local church supports us and sends the money to Wycliffe. You could write me at my first name, last name, email, CSABA_Leidenfrost, LEIDENFROST @SIL.org. And if you send me an email, I'll give you my account number, and then basically you send in a check to Wycliffe with the account number on it, and they'll credit whatever you send into our account.
Fantastic.
But I can give you the details there. Otherwise, I have to remember what the zip code is for Orlando, Florida.
Yep, all of that. Yeah. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Really appreciate it. Right. See you guys.